Hey guys, what's going on? Goofy Rexy here. Hope everybody is doing well. And I realize that today's video may be a little bit controversial, even like controversial towards me, because I believe that as content creators, we potentially might be giving beginners bad advice when we talk about prepping for endgame content. And I'll talk about what I mean here a little bit more in this video. A lot of us content creators are endgame players, right? So whenever we try to tailor information for beginners, I think we still have a little bit of that frame of mind where we're trying to get you to end game content as quickly as possible, not really kind of putting the context out there correctly that it does take quite some time for a beginner player to be able to get to end game content. Because the way that I view it, and maybe other people have different views on it, is that as a beginner player, it would probably take you about a year and a half or maybe a year, or maybe a little bit less than a year and a half to probably get to endgame content. Because to me, I view endgame as you being able to do Dark Dimension 4, getting Doom, and then progressing to being able to do Dark Dimension 5, right? That's kind of the way I look at endgame content. I look at mid-game as Dark Dimension 3. Like that's kind of how I view it. So really, endgame content is quite far away. And a lot of the times when we make recommendations for characters, we talk about how this character is good in endgame content, how that character can be used for endgame this. And I'll give you an example. And by the way, like when I say content creators, I am including myself in this list. Like I am one of the content creators because I make a lot of beginner content, because I want to try to help out beginner players, because it's really tough to navigate as a beginner player, and a lot of other content creators do a really great job of that as well. But I just feel like it's just something that we need to clean up here. But like for instance, the Rebirth team as an example, right? We'll say invest into Captain America, Winter Soldier, because they're going to be a good bio Doom Raid team. Or we'll talk about the Bionic Avengers because they're a good tech Doom Raid team. When in reality, as a beginner, once you probably get to endgame and you're doing Doom Raids, these teams might be obsolete, right? It may not necessarily be a super important team. Now, yes, I do admit that some of these teams at times can be used in other formats of the game. Some can be used for Scourges. I just think that a lot of the times we kind of fall into this trap and we're not really giving you context in terms of how long it may take for you to get to endgame. And also keeping in mind that, guess what? You may not even use this team at the endgame level. And the prime example of that, right, is that with the Web Warriors. The Web Warriors just got replaced by the Rebirth team, who is a bio Doom Raid team, right? So a lot of the times, a lot of us are saying, invest into Web Warriors. And as a beginner player, if you started investing into Web Warriors, you may get some value out of it. And I'll make a separate video about that. But at the end of the day, we were talking about bio Doom Raids when now they're not even being used for that bio Doom Raid team. So there's some times where I think we have to be a little bit careful where we're talking about end game stuff as CCs who are creating beginner content, because I do think that sometimes we do fail to kind of think about it in that context. Also, with the Rebirth team, there's 3 new characters on the team, right? So you guys may not be able to get them if you're not a spender who's a beginner player. So for instance, Captain Carter was probably the easiest of all the events to be able to unlock and get shards for. Maybe US Agent. It all depends. I don't know. For a beginner player, I'm not quite sure specifically which one would have been easier. I think Captain Carter may have been simpler if you were in a good alliance. I think that might have been made a difference. But for the most part, these are 3 new characters. So if you're looking at raid content, you're probably going to want the whole team, although you can plug and play a couple characters. I think once again, we're focusing so much on characters that are going to be good end game, but it can also kind of be crippling for beginner players, because there's other characters that you can use in the interim while you wait for new characters to become available, right? And I do think that the game needs to improve where this is concerned and actually giving out characters a little bit more frequently and creating easier ways for players to be able to get older characters that are still relevant in the game that can be used for end-game content, if you want to use that terminology. There's still ways that they can improve upon that, but they're not doing that right now. But I think what we need to talk about more is what you can use in the interim, instead of kind of crippling you to say, oh, you should only invest into this because this is going to be a waste, when it's not fully a waste if you implement stopping points, right? Yes, XYZ character may not be great, but if you invest into XYZ character up until a certain point and stop and don't go past that point, I think you're okay, right? I think we need to be a little bit more clearer and creating that and packaging that information in that sort of way, as opposed to just saying, don't invest into these characters because they're trash. No, don't invest. You can invest into these characters, but just invest into them up to a certain point until you then get these newer characters that will be good if you want to use that for end game content, right? That's like the way that I would probably sort of kind of want to package that information moving forward, because like I said, this is therapeutic for me too, because I realize that I do this. I think also we give too much information. It's like, we're telling you about all these like different teams and these different characters that can be used for this different thing, when I think it'd probably be a little bit easier if we parse that information out a little bit, right? Let's talk about the raid characters that you can use as a beginner. Let's talk about the arena characters. Let's talk about the heroes team. Let's talk about villain. Let's put that stuff in separate videos, so it's a little bit more easier for you guys to digest. I think a lot of the times we want to put a lot of information in one video because maybe we don't want to make multiple videos about it. But I think in general, I think it would be better if we packaged it a little bit differently across different videos to make it a little bit more easier and digestible for you. And like I said, those stopping points I think will be massively, massively important. I think a lot of the times too, we do come off a little bit jaded when it comes to being endgame players. So a lot of the times we talk about things and we make ill references to stuff a lot of the times, right? Because we're experiencing something that maybe potentially you as a beginner player is not experiencing, and we're kind of feeding that into a video. I think in reality, there are things that are harder at endgame, but there are also things that will be easier for you because you're not endgame, right? Like for instance, some things that were difficult for us were being able to advance and get through levels, because we did not have access to farming ISO campaign levels for quite some time until a little bit later on. But now as a beginner player, once you finally get to level 50 or 55, and you can start doing that ISO campaign, you can now utilize that as a way to be able to advance and get to levels a little bit faster, as to where back then it was much more challenging for us to be able to do that. So there are some things that are a little bit easier. ISOs are going to be a little bit easier, not the blue ones, but the green ISOs are a little bit easier. There's still some bottlenecks that are definitely there, and I would definitely like to see them removed for you guys, like ability materials, things like, there's other bottlenecks. I think training mats are across the board, but there's some other bottlenecks that are there. I would like to see them alleviate and remove for you guys, because I think some of those are just old and kind of just need to advance. There's a lot of things that I think that the game needs to do from a beginner perspective. We talked about creating more ways for you guys to be able to get characters that are older that can still be good and usable in the interim while you wait for those later characters. I think that there needs to be a better way to do that. And then, like I said, some of these bottlenecks that are there. So listen, let me wrap this up. I think overall, what I endeavor to do, and what I think a lot of content creators should endeavor to do, especially as we're endgame players who are creating beginner content, I think one of the things that we need to start doing is condensing the information, right? Making it a little bit more digestible and easier for you guys to understand, right? In a little bit of ways. I know I hate infographics. Maybe I need to start doing some more graphics, or at least PowerPoint, so that you guys can see me go through information on the screen, as opposed to just looking at my roster and me clicking on favorites and things like that. So that's something that I'll start doing, making more updated information, right? To make sure that things are, being updated every single month, or every single 2 months, keeping sort of like a running doc of that. I think also as well too is we need your feedback. Let's just flat out point out, like, we need your feedback. Like, what is it that you want us to do? What information do you want to grab from us? Like, what information do you want? Because we're trying to make content to say, all right, this is what I think you should do. But at the end of the day, you're the one that's saying, you're the one that's saying that this is what I need. And we'd like for you guys to be able to share that information with us. So leave that in the comments, guys, so that we can have an understanding of what exactly it is that you want. Like, do you want help with ISOs? Do you want us to break down older teams and go through team reviews? Do you want individual raid videos? I think that's what I'm going to start doing, like raid characters for beginners, arena characters for beginners. Let's do the heroes campaign for beginners, villains campaign for beginners, things like that. If that's what you want us to do, and I'll make sure that I make a point to actually start doing that. But I've gone off on this massive diatribe, so I'm gonna stop here. Hopefully this was a helpful video for you. This is more of a confession video, I think. But I think it's something that we all do, and it's something that I've noticed because I do watch other beginner content too to make sure that I'm always providing the best value, you know, to you guys as beginner players. So hopefully this is helpful information for you. Leave it in the comments. Let me know. If you want to subscribe to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you want to share this with somebody else, go ahead and share it. But definitely like the video because it does help out the YouTube algorithm, guys. So I do appreciate it. Until next time, guys, like I said, I will continue to try to do my very best to create the best content for you beginners as we move forward here. But until next time, guys, y'all be blessed. Y'all be safe.